This isn't just a fixture, it's a statement piece. The kind of thing that makes people stop mid-step. A beam that looks like it's been pulled straight from a century-old barn. Every knot, every grain, carrying the weight of history. Frozen like a time capsule overhead. And if I were to survey most of you watching, I would bet that 90% of you would say that the hardest part of this building is something like the wiring, the cutting, or maybe even getting it to hang straight. But only 10% of you would guess the real challenge. And that's what I'm about to show you. And in this video, I want to walk you through the hidden tricks and the unexpected methods that make this big, bold, beautiful piece achievable, even if you don't have a ton of experience. Now, I want to make a deal with you, so listen up, because either I'm going to save you a ton of time or a ton of money, but you only get to have one. Now, for those of you who'd rather save some time, simple. You could go to the site like Your Western Decorating, and you could find this light, and you could spend around $7,000 on this rustic beam pendant light. But if that's a little steep for you, you could check out another place like Hangout Lights, where they run closer to $1,500. But if you got a little bit of time and some creativity, I'm going to show you how to build something like this that looks even better for under $85. And if you stick around until the very end, I'm going to give some critical finishing touches that I want to show you. And you'll actually get to help me decide how this project turns out. I didn't think it was important to show the steps where I cut and box the boards together. What I really wanted to get to was the meat and potatoes of the build, shaping and aging of the wood. Now, as you can see, I'm using a 4.5-inch angle grinder with a wire wheel. I'm not just letting the weight of the grinder float on the surface. No, I'm actually putting a little bit of pressure behind it. That way, the spinning wires dig into the softer parts of the pine, kind of carving them out. And what's left behind are these raised ridges of grain. Notice how even the butt joint, which began at the bottom and then it kind of joined the side pieces, really were obvious in the beginning, but it's starting to blend in. And quick side note, guys, don't forget to wear eye protection here. And those little wires do love to fly off in the dust. Man, you do not want to be breathing that in. You'll also see that in the beginning that there was a splash of purple paint on the board. Now that's not my doing, that's actually Home Depot. They marked down cracked boards with that spray paint, and I scored an additional 70% off. And for me, I just trimmed the cracked end of the board off, and I still had plenty of usable wood for this project. So next time that you guys are in the store, check out the clearance bin. It is a gold mine. Now, beams traditionally have what we like to call wounds of life. They have scratches, dings, scars that give them character. So I'll be pounding in a big threaded screw on the edge. And I'll even take a stiff wire brush and drag it, not just with the grain, but also against and across the grain, adding some random scars. Now guys, the trick here is less is more. Do not overdo this part, just enough to tell a story. What I love about this stage is how fast the wood starts to transform. You can actually hear and feel the grinder bite differently when it's chewing into the soft versus the ridges over kind of those harder ridges. And within minutes, that flat piece of pine starts to look like it's been hanging in a barn for hundreds of years. Once I've added enough life and enough texture, it is time to lock in that aged look with stain and finish. And this is where the real magic happens. Now that the beam has some character, it is time to bring that look to life with stain. And this is one of my favorite parts. I like using a gel stain instead of a thin, runny liquid stain. And the reason honestly comes down to control. Gel stains are thicker, so they'll sit on the surface longer, and they don't just soak in wherever they want to. That's especially important with pine, where the liquid stain can blotch and streak before you can even catch it. And the gel stain is just so much better at staying where you need it to, and it's so much better for applying on verticals. Now, here's the real beauty of gel stain. It works with the texture we just carved into the wood. As you wipe it off, the gel will naturally settle into the scars, right? Those valleys of the grain and all those little imperfections that we added. When you come back and wipe off the excess, right, the peaks will naturally get lighter, but those valleys will hold more color. The result is really kind of like a deeper tone in the low spots, almost like natural shadowing. And that contrast is what makes the piece look aged and authentic, really, honestly, rather than just looking like it got painted brown. I like to think of it like the wood is telling a story. The highs, the lows, they stand out differently, just like they would if the beam had been sitting inside a barn for 100 years. Now, a quick pro tip. When you guys are done, don't toss your rags, your used rags, into a pile. Gel stain rags, just like any oil-based finish, can actually self-ignite if you leave them bunched up. Always lay them flat to dry outside and seal them in like a metal container. Even consider adding some water until you can safely throw them away. And now that the staining is almost done, this is where most people think that the project gets easier. But back at the beginning, I had mentioned how 90% of people feel that the hardest part of the beam light is either the cutting or the wiring. But in my opinion, the absolute hardest part is actually deciding how to finish it. Do you lower it from the ceiling with a rope? Do you hang pendant-style hemp cords from the beam itself? Do you wrap the underside in metal? Or maybe even use expanded metal for a more industrial look? The options are endless, and honestly, it can be overwhelming. So here's my advice. Jump on Pinterest and just start searching beam light. Scroll through the ideas until one idea and or concept works with you. It'll click. And don't forget that you can take different pieces from different lights and wrap them into one masterpiece. That's exactly how I landed on at least my way of fastening it to the ceiling. I used 3/4-inch black pipe with floor flanges as the ceiling connection. It gave me the strength and the clean look that I was after. And to be honest, I had also toyed with the idea of adding side hooks on the beam light for pots and pans, which meant that I needed something more secure than just rope or chain. The black pipe solved that problem perfectly. Now, it's just a matter of dialing in the spacing before I lock it into place. Check, check. So when it comes to spacing, I want to just maybe say this. One, I do think that when you're having it, the spacing of, let's say, the bar or whatever, how you're going to fasten the mechanism, is to have have the space divided. Now, if I were to do 3 equal parts, meaning there's this side in between the 2 pipes and the end, right? To get them even, that's going to push them in right out here. Now, a couple things to consider. If you have them pretty wide, it's going to give it kind of a heavier feel, a more anchored to it. So I think having the spacing further in is great. Here's one of the challenges that I'm running into, though, is the light. How do I put the light in there? I originally was planning on having this out there wide enough so that this could still go in the middle, but I think the reality is that what I'm going to end up doing is setting these in by about 12 inches on either side, which allows me to then have the light still recessed, but at more of a diagonal, if that makes sense. So it'll be set a little bit low, so when it turns on, the ceiling will illuminate, and I think that's going to give me a really good feel, and that doesn't cause me to keep these the pipes actually too far out, again, which I just think is too heavy of a look for what I'm going for. So I like that. So I've decided on that, and I'll put up a shot here that'll show you my spacing on the off chance that that would be helpful for you. Also, as it relates to the pendant lights, my pendants, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill in from the inside edge, is going to be 14 inches, which is going to pop down right about here, 28 directly in the center, and then also 42 from one side. Or I could do it from this side. It'd be the exact same thing. But basically, it's dividing my spacing into equal parts as far as the pendant is concerned. And with my current depth, that means that I have to put it at about 4 7/8 is center for me. So I'm going to be marking all those, drilling those, and getting all of this installed. But I do need to spray paint these. I will say this, having a gloss color is not super great, even though my urethane is a satin. That's a satin finish on that. So I didn't want anything super glossy because I think it takes away from the rustic, kind of that authentic look, if you will. And for this, what I'm doing is I'm doing ultra matte finish in pure black. So this will be going up. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because part of my consistent theme throughout through the studio is going to be similar to that of in here when you look at it, right? I've got the rustic board. Notice that's going to be a similar fashion of what I'm actually doing in the studio. And then of course this kind of vibe over here of this mahogany is similar to this color combination that I have in my man cave. I like the combo. I'm going to go with it. I've always dreamed about having a rustic cabin. This is going to be part of that. So I think that will actually work well. And in the rest of my design, I'm going to be using a lot of the black pipe and the flanges to create shelves, to create a lot of different things. So this look of this, although right at the moment when I get it up, might appear to be a little bit standoffish or by itself, it will tie into the eventual design and kind of what I'm thinking as far as that's concerned in my head. So let's go ahead and start getting these holes cut and get the lights in right after we get these painted. Now before mounting it, I wanted to give the black pipe just a quick coat of matte black spray paint. To make the job easier, I use this little spray can trigger handle. It just snaps on the end and it basically turns the can into a pistol grip. Way more comfortable, way more control, and honestly, it just saves your fingers from cramping. They're inexpensive and worth every penny. Now guys, if you want to check out this spray can trigger or honestly any of the other tools or material that I've mentioned, I'll basically drop a link in the description, which makes it a lot easier for you to find what I'm talking about. And if you do end up buying something through those links, it doesn't cost you a penny more, but it does help support the General's Workshop. So thank you for all your support. It really does mean a lot. So here's a classic example of being adaptable mid-project. At this point, I started drilling holes that I never actually ended up using. The plan was to run 18 gauge wire through the beam and have the lights dangle about 12 inches below. But as I worked through it, I realized that I liked the look of the bulbs mounted flush with the beam so much better. So the original holes got scrapped. I decided to come back with a larger Forstner bit to cut clean openings for the sockets themselves. That let the bulb socket fit securely inside the beam, which you'll see in a little bit in the build. Now, if you want your lights to dangle, then this is exactly the way that you'd bring your wire up through the beam. So even though this hole didn't work for me, it might be the perfect option for your setup. Now, quick lesson here. Don't be afraid to pivot mid-project. Sometimes the better idea only shows up once you've already started, and that's part of what makes DIY projects so fun. When it comes to electrical, you need to do your own research. Different bulbs and setups can have different demands on the wires, so definitely do your due diligence here. For my build, I'm dropping an extension cord down from the ceiling. In my particular case, that ceiling line is already tied to a flip switch back by the main door, so I can actually kill the power pretty easily. The extension cord I'm using has female outlets on both sides, which gives me the flexibility to add a remote outlet kit. For those of you that have not seen these before, the beauty of a remote kit is that it lets me separate the circuit. I want the 3 warm Edison style bulbs on one control, and I want the bright, cool bounce light on top on another. Now by plugging each into opposite sides of the cord, I can now use this remote to control them independently without rerunning wires back to the box. For me, it worked out perfectly. But Mom and Dad, if you lose this remote, I'm sorry. I do not have a spare. For this next part, I grabbed a couple of random L brackets that I had laying around. They weren't meant for this project, but with a dab of super glue, they actually worked as a simple, though not exactly an entirely secure, way of holding the beam light in place while I line things up. I even joked that I should have put out a help wanted ad just to get this light installed. You could see here that I'm using a multi-plane level to find the center of the room. The trick was to line that green laser up with the middle socket on the beam so that I know where exactly to place it. Doing this solo turned out to be pretty awkward. At first, I thought about building some sort of a jig or a contraption to hold the light steady, but in the end, I decided it was way easier just to swallow my pride and ask for help. Now, before I officially call this project finished, I want your help with the final look. Since we're already asking for help, do me a favor, hit that like button, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing so you can follow this tiny house playlist as it comes together. Now, here's the deal. I'm not making the final call until I see what your guys' votes are for the options above. Whatever comes out on top, that's what I'll lock in, and I'll reveal it in a results video as a follow-up. So let's talk real numbers. If you guys were to buy everything that you would need to make that light, you'd be spending roughly about $199. Still a far cry from $1,500 and a much farther cry from $7,000. But here's what I love. If you have stuff lying around like I did, I actually had multiple things on hand that I was able to use. My pine wood that I already had that, a few sockets, wires, wire nuts. So if you were to subtract those things, I actually only spent $85. And that's the beautiful thing. Most of you that want to make a light like this probably have some of the material that you already need to make it. So it makes it just a lot easier as far as that's concerned. So I think the point is whether or not you're starting from scratch or not, really it proves that you don't need a storehouse full of tools or a ton of material to make something like this. And guys, this is just one step in the ADU process. In the next video, I'm going to actually be tackling upper and lower cabinets for it. And so if you want to see how that's coming together, then definitely check that out. Also though, if you're wanting a different style of a light, you can also see that I've got this one up here. And this one has a little bit more of a farmhouse build to it. If you want to check out how I actually made this particular light, well then click the link down here for the next light, or the one up here for the next video when it comes out.